Okay, so my one big takeaway from this semester's history of China would be the cultural side of the history of China, which include the philosophical roots of Chinese Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism that echo from three dynasties and leads all the way to the present. So, so throughout the semester, I've learned quite a lot about this philosophy, like Confucianism and its values, and I find the values very interesting because I've never learned them before, and it makes me have a better understanding of China and its culture all the way back then, and how people would respect one another. And so Confucianism and Taoism and its values, it all started way back then. Its practices, some of its practices were practiced all the way back in the Xia, when Yao, Shun, and Yu, the three sage kings, were around, who practiced ritual and being respectful, and those are some values that were practiced all the way back then. But the time when the Confucian classics and when the Shujing and Shijing, the philosophical books, were introduced, were all the way back in the Western Zhou. And from the Western Zhou onwards, people practiced the philosophy of Confucianism, and it was very, very popular back then, and it lasted for quite a long time. But say after the around the Ming Dynasty, when China starts to become more modern, the value in Confucianism lessens, which is a bit sad, but there is still some Confucianism today. And so what I liked about Confucianism was that it had to do a lot with virtue and respect and filial piety, which is respecting your parents and elders, and it basically it was such a great thing back then that it brought two dynasties out of chaos, which is during the Warring States and the period of disunity. Because during the Warring States, when all the states were warring against each other, Confucianism was there to stop it, because the one thing that came up was the 100 schools of thought, which is basically a thing where the people learn the values and philosophies of Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, and it was a lotus blossom, basically, that sprouted out of the chaos and turned into a beautiful thing. It brought China back together. That's what I find so important about it. And another place was, like I said earlier, the period of disunity. There was a lot of corruption during that time, and the government was corrupt. They were fighting over fiefs. Everything was just out of control. So a few sages with Confucian and Taoist values, and who practiced Taoism and Confucianism, they went out to away from the city, away from the corruption, and they started doing what they liked, and at the same time they followed their values. And keep in mind that these sages, they're casual, and they're doing whatever they feel like, yet there's still Confucians and Taoists. So I can see that Confucianism and Taoism has an impact on how they behave, and others want it to be like them. Other people want it to be just like them. So a few people would even want pictures of these Confucians and slash Taoists on their tombstones, just so they can live with them in the afterlife. And yeah, these people were called Confucians without a cause, and there were these famous sages with Confucian values and Taoist values as well, and they were called the 7 sages of the bamboo. If I can get, yeah, it was the 7 stages of the bamboo growth, and they basically represented the Chinese hippie life, and they were really casual, and they were away from the corruption. So people started following them. It brought them out of the corruption, well, some of the people, and it just helped the dynasty overall. So I can clearly see that these Confucian values and Taoist values, they really helped two dynasties get out of disunion. So I find that philosophy is very, very important, and that's what I find so interesting about it as well. So from yeah, so from wave 1, which is from the Xia all the way to the Eastern Zhou to the Warring States period, Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism was brought up from the 100 schools of thought. And you might ask, well, how does it impact the later waves? Well, in wave 2, when the first the first emperor of wave 2 was Qin Huangdi, who controlled the Qin dynasty, and he adopted the Confucian value as the Han ideology, and apparently it worked pretty well. And yes, that is what they did, and I already explained how it got China out of the period of disunion as well. So, and Qin's dynasty reforms with these Confucian values and philosophical values has affected it and many dynasties ahead of it, because all the other dynasties ahead of it, all the other dynasties ahead of the Qin dynasty depended on the Qin dynasty's political and economic reforms. And if Confucian values were not involved, maybe there would not have been a golden age in the Han dynasty. I mean, who knows? Confucianism seems to have affected the way the government works quite a lot in politics. So from there it moves on to a period of disunity with the hippie Chinese sages, with the Confucian and Taoist values, and we go on to wave 3, where you can see that the philosophical values is still used, because in the middle of wave 3, which is the Song dynasty. Around the Song dynasty, they bring back the Confucian civil service exams, and I know it might not seem like much. Oh, you take a Confucian value and put it in an exam, but it actually counts quite a lot. Like, it affects the government. It affects the government heavily, because it prevents any corruption, and it allows the virtuous and the people with the values to work in the government. So that really like saved the government from any more corruption and disruptions and disunions throughout the dynasty. So it was actually very important how Confucianism went into was how the Confucius civil service exams were brought up again, and it lasted from wave 4 all the way. Yeah, it lasted throughout wave 4. It lasted for a very long time, for around 1,000 years, and it went. It was abolished near the end of wave 4 when there was a foreign invasion because of the wars that China had with the other countries and the conflicts it had. So yeah, it lasted for a pretty long time, from 3 waves. And you might be wondering, well, is there Confucianism today? Well, yeah, there's still some today, even though it's kind of died over time. There's still values of Confucianism today because if you walk in China, you might see people bowing to each other or being polite to each other. Those are Confucian values. And there may even be some people still worshipping their ancestors. That counts as a Confucian value as well. See, even though the whole Confucius thing has kind of died away, the philosophy is still here in the present, and that's what I think it is, and I think it will remain that way. And yes, that is one of my favorites. And yeah, that's what I find so amazing about Confucianism, how it had such a huge impact back then. Another interesting thing I'd like to say is that Confucianism not only values respect and virtue, it also values like beautiful things like music. When I say music, I'm not talking about rap, of course, or I'm not talking about mainstream R&B and rap and Eminem and all that. I'm talking about like the old ancient Chinese music with the bells. Yeah, I think their bells are chimes. And Confucius and the philosophy back then valued music so much that whenever music played, everyone would fall silent. So, as in this packet here, Confucius and the Analects. So these are Analects received from the book called The Analects of Confucius, by Confucius, of course. And it says that when Confucius was singing with others, if someone else sang a song beautifully, he always asked him to sing the piece again before joining in to harmonize. So, asking this, if Confucius can ask another person to sing again, that shows how much he values music, and that shows that he wants to be like part of it and how he enjoys it so much. And that's what I like about it, because nowadays you don't see stuff like that, like people like chiming into Chinese music, but you see people rapping on the street nowadays, and yeah, I find that a bit barbaric, and I just find it so peaceful and sage-like when like Confucius would join in to something so simple as to like Chinese music. So that's what I find so cool about this philosophy. And well, Confucianism has other values on education, wealth, government, not to corrupt the government, and she says some wise words with education. He thinks that's very important as well. And during class one time,